1. So last month, me and my wife were sitting on the couch watching Game of Thrones. I work a night shift, and I'm normally awake at night, so by this time it's around 3 in the morning. And I like to have the volume really loud on my speakers. Not a very important detail, but why leave it out, you know? But anyways, the TV was so loud that I didn't hear the doorbell ring. And immediately after it rang, my wife had said, "Someone just rang the doorbell," to which I replied, "What?" Because of the TV being so loud, I did not hear her, which she then followed up with, "Someone's coming into the house again." What? By this point, I can kinda hear the front door opening. Keep in mind this all happened within the span of like 9 seconds, if that. Now from the couch, I can just barely see into the hallway of the front door, but I can see the door has opened. I am now praying that it's one of my friends. After shutting the door behind them, now coming around the corner, is some random guy who neither me nor my wife have ever seen before. He walks deeper into the house, passing through the living room, doesn't even acknowledge us, as if he doesn't see us, and is now basically behind us all while looking around very confused like. He then stops, looks at me and my wife and says, "Where's Martha?" Which I replied, "Hey, you're in the wrong fucking house, dude. You gotta go, like, now." And he then proceeded to try and leave through the back door. Me and my wife were both like, "No, asshole, use the front door. What's the matter with you?" He then leaves. Not even a minute later, I figured he was probably fucked up and I should make sure he's okay. And I go outside to find him. I checked all around the house, walked down the driveway to the street, looked around pretty hard for him, and he was gone. And I haven't seen him since. Now here's why I believe this may have been a glitch. First things first, I'm in the Marine Corps, and live on the base in base housing. Normal enough, right? Maybe he was just some drunk Marine looking for someone. That would explain a lot, but this guy was not a Marine or military member by any means. He had medium-length hair and he looked young, but not young enough to be someone's child. Like he had to be mid-20s. And also, may have had a good amount of facial hair if memory serves me. So I'm wondering who this guy is and how he got on base in the first place. Now this guy was not drunk, or at least he didn't seem so. He was walking normal and seemed coherent enough to not be drunk at all. So maybe he was on drugs. Possibly some kind of hallucinogen. But if that's the case, how did he get on base if he was tripping? And if he wasn't tripping when he got on base, how did he get the drugs on base? Who was he hanging out with? Why was he tripping? It just didn't add up. Now this whole situation was extremely bizarre. Like 3 AM. Also, I should note my dog was on the couch next to me. He's a German Shepherd and kinda has that guard dog mentality. He normally kinda freaks out when the doorbell rings or if someone walks in the house, even if it's a friend. But when this shit went down, he literally did not budge whatsoever. Also, with that being said, this guy did not seem threatening at all. Like me and my wife just sat there looking at him, we weren't frightened or anything. And I should know that my wife wasn't wearing pants either. And still, none of us felt threatened, just very confused. The only movement I made was as I leaned forward and paused the show because, come on, it's Game of Thrones. I'm not trying to miss that shit. Also, another weird thing was that me and my wife have a very hazy recollection of what this guy looked like, and the whole situation in general, as if we were under the influence of something. Admittedly, I was drinking, but I was only just starting my 3rd beer, which is nowhere near enough to have me buzzed at the least. But I mean, like, I couldn't tell you what his face looked like. Like, all I know is that he was darker skinned, like Indian, maybe, with medium-length brown hair. He had blue jeans, blue shoes, a black shirt, and a red sweatshirt. From what I remember. My wife swears on everything that he wasn't wearing a sweatshirt at all, but basically the best description of what this guy looked like is the actor Alex Wolff from the movie Hereditary, if anyone here has seen. But basically the whole thing felt as though it almost didn't even happen. The biggest detail that has me confused is Martha. Me nor my wife personally know anyone named Martha. I knew the prior family that lived in this house before us, and neither do they. I also asked my neighbors on both sides for 3 houses down in each direction, and none of them know a Martha either. Now what makes this kind of weirder to me was that earlier that day, maybe like 3 or 4 hours prior, I was playing video games with my brother and friend and talking to them in the voice chat. And somehow or other, we ended up talking about that scene from Batman v Superman, where they say Martha and he's like, "Why did you say that name?" We were joking around about it. Then, 4 hours later, some guy walks into my house asking for Martha. On top of the fact that he seemingly disappeared moments after he left my house. There's just a lot of details here that I've lost sleep over, and I live on a really small base and have not run into this guy, nor has my wife. I've asked PMO if they know of anything like that happening recently, and they came up with nothing. Me and my wife are pretty confident that it was a glitch, just given all the details in this situation, and most, if not all, adding up. Her reasoning being that somehow or other, with the whole Martha talk from Batman v Superman earlier, that the universe glitched out and sent this guy from Hereditary, which I should also note me and my wife had just recently seen, into our life asking about Martha and her whereabouts. I don't want to believe it's a glitch because it's been fucking with my sanity. I'm hoping someone can chime in on this. Like if you've had a similar experience happen to you or anything of the sort. Or even if you know Martha, tell that bitch this guy's walking into random houses for her. But please, feedback would be greatly appreciated. 2. This happened probably 10 plus years or so ago. A group of friends and I decided to take a trip to the mountains for some hiking and camping. We spent a long day hiking, taking breaks to snack and talk and explore. I was having a great time. After making it to the top of the mountain, where we sat and enjoyed the view for a bit, we decided to start hiking back down to ensure we made it back to the campsite before dusk. I told them I'd have to pee and that I'd catch up. I jumped off the trail a ways, found a tree, and gave it the R. Kelly treatment, and then made my way back to the trail. I remember rushing to try and catch up because I thought it was weird that I hadn't run into them yet. I wasn't peeing for that long after all, but after a while I began to feel a bit worried, kinda like the feeling you get when you're driving and you know you have to make a turn, but you're not sure if you passed the street you needed already or not. Looming uncertainty. I started getting really tired and lightheaded and cold, so I stopped by this big flat rock that had been sitting in the sun and decided to rest and catch my breath, thinking maybe I passed them somehow and they might catch up to me. I can still remember how awesome the warmth of that rock felt. I laid on my back, closed my eyes, and started feeling calm and relaxed, when suddenly I heard my friends talking. This is where shit gets weird. I felt like I was waking up. I was groggy, but felt revitalized and still on that lovely warm flat rock. My friends were sitting around me, just chatting and realizing I was waking up. I said something like, "Where'd you guys come from?" thinking that they might have backtracked to meet up with me after I failed to catch up with them. They had a completely different stretch of events that led to me waking up on that rock with them. They told me that when I got back from peeing, I was acting really sluggish, like dragging my feet and walking insanely slow. They asked if I was alright and said I just shrugged, avoiding eye contact, and said, "Let's go." They said as we hiked back down, together apparently. They tried to match my pace, but I was becoming increasingly zombie-like, non-responsive and just shuffling along at a snail's pace. A couple of my friends, concerned I might be sick, apparently ran ahead to try to find the ranger station, while others stayed by my side as we walked. They said they kept trying to engage me in conversation, but I was so out of it, and just scuffed along silently. Apparently the friends that ran ahead crossed the path with some hikers heading up the trail. The hikers informed them how far the ranger station was, and said they'd give me some ibuprofen when they passed the rest of us. They told me that at this point they kept making me stop and rest every so often. It was during one of these resting periods that the hikers showed up and offered the pills to me. I was told I looked at the pills and at the hikers with groggy suspicion, and wouldn't respond or take the pills from them. A friend took them and thanked the hikers, who went on their way up the trail. They told me I watched the hikers until they went around a corner, as my friends kept trying to get my attention to take the pills. I refused to take the pills and just kept saying, "I don't know who these people were, I'm not taking pills from strangers." Eventually I was convinced to take the pills, was given a granola bar to munch on, and then I laid down on the warm, flat rock and went to sleep. They said I had napped for 10 minutes before I woke up, and they started telling me about how weird I had been acting. I told them I didn't remember any of it, but decided not to tell them that I had a very different recollection of events. I didn't really understand what had happened and was still mulling everything over, trying to make sense of it. As we continued down the trail, they were surprised at how well I had recovered. I considered telling them about my version of things, that I didn't hike to the flat rock with them, that I felt fine before I stopped, and that I just stopped to rest and catch my breath a bit, hoping to eventually run into them. That they just kind of showed up out of nowhere, but I couldn't figure out a way to explain it without sounding like a crazy person. Every so often I think back to that hike, and the only memory I have is of how I finished peeing and started hiking on my own to catch up with them, and resting on that rock for a moment before finding myself in their presence, and listening to them tell me I had actually been with them the whole time, completely out of sorts and acting paranoid. I considered that they were all playing a joke on me, but they seemed genuinely concerned. Just a very weird experience that even more than a decade later, I don't fully understand. 3. The road my wife and I live on has only one other road that comes into it. There is a very distinct crossroads where this other road comes in, and in that corner an old house sits falling apart. The house is not haunted or anything of the sort. In fact, it's a pretty new build, probably 50s or so, and the owners only moved out a few years ago. The owners have plenty of money, so they just let the place rot instead of renting or tear down. Behind this house is a large field, and the field entrance, or field road, lies to the right side of this old house. One more fact that is important. We are surrounded by state-protected wetlands on all sides, and the local college sends classes out for study. I'm sure as part of a wildlife lab class. Therefore, I'm used to seeing people I don't know on our road and in the woods, always during the day, and we are a very safe little community at night. Last year around this time I was driving to work. It's early in the morning, but light outside. My wife leaves first for her job and takes the same route I do, so if something was amiss, she would have called or texted. She didn't, so I think this incident only happened to me. On my way towards the crossroads, nothing was out of the ordinary. No extra cars or buses. That doesn't strike me as odd, as the local college doesn't do any studies out here until around lunchtime. As I approach the crossroads, and the house comes into view, I see a person standing there. That's odd. So I roll my window down and slow down even more. You can only travel about 25 miles per hour on this road due to the curves. Standing in the crossroads is an older African-American lady, really wrinkled skin, wearing an ankle-length dress and a bonnet while holding a wicker basket. I am creeping along at this point and come to a stop and wave. Yes, my adrenaline was rushing, and I had no idea who or what this was, but was still going to be friendly and say hello. I am also in law enforcement and always carry my pistol in my personal truck, so I'm not too worried. She looks odd at me and gives me a half-wave back. She looks scared as hell. That's when I noticed it. Behind her, about another 20 yards away, is a thinner black lady, in the same sort of attire, who is walking towards us, and abruptly stops. The stop in movement is what caught my eye. The First Lady and I don't exchange any words, and I look towards the old house on my right, and see about 10 to 12 other ladies in the field, all in the same dress, all carrying baskets. They are all stooped over and seem to be picking things from the ground. They all stand up and look towards me all at once, and I can see their mouths moving as they speak to each other. I'm getting weird vibes from the whole encounter, so I slowly take off and look at the First Lady one more time, and notice the gravel road is no longer gravel, it's dirt. Wow. As I drive off, I take one more look into the field the group was in. from beside the field up the road. Empty. No one is out there. The field is also bare. So I turn around at the end of the road and come back. No one. Everyone is gone and all surroundings are back to normal. So I asked my wife about all of this. She looked at me really strange and asked if I'm sure where I saw this. Yes, of course. She informs me that all that land, including where we live, used to be one huge farm and has been since before the Civil War. She also informs me that the field is never in crops anymore because the owners don't like people leasing it for farmland. They just till it every summer and let the grass grow until the following summer. Thinking logically, I called some friends I have that work at the local college and asked if anything was happening on the day this happened. Any studies, any drama projects, any movies? Nothing. We have several friends who are well connected in town, and I asked them if anyone was filming a movie or short film. Again, nothing. I never felt threatened or in danger or really even scared. Just weird. Also worth mentioning, after arriving at work I dealt with a killer headache all day. Seemed like a sinus headache, but a little more prominent than normal. 4. My Mimi has always been an integral part of my life. She's a young grandparent, 58-ish, and is more of a mother to me than my actual mother. For context, I have lived with her for 1.5 years now after my mother kicked me out of my house. From the time my memory developed, I can remember always having paranormal experiences, especially in her house. My Mimi's house is, as my whole family believes, haunted. Specifically by a young girl. I have countless stories of seeing people on the staircase, or hearing voices whispering unintelligibly, or sometimes my own name. But more recently I've been experiencing things that I can only explain as, and have named, the power of the universe. Now when I was younger I ran with the idea of being a descendant of a Salem witch that was killed in her time. I told everyone that would listen, but now, at the age of 19, it's starting to become a reality, I guess. I could never pinpoint exactly when these things started happening, but I know that it's now a common occurrence. The things that happen to me make me sound crazy, and I can't really do them justice, but I'll try my best. I guess I should start at my very, very keen intuition. It's never anything that matters, but in a way that's as humble as possible, I'm very literally almost never wrong. It's little things like something I think will happen or something going on in my life. To give an example, my current college roommate and I met a dealer who is now our dealer if anyone cares, and upon them hanging out more I told myself, even if not right now, something is happening or will happen between them. And I expressed this to her and multiple other people. She denied it half-heartedly around the second week of them hanging out non-stop. Fast forward 2 days later, and she's showing me the hickeys on her chest. I understand at this point y'all are saying, okay, and what? But like I said, I cannot fully explain the concrete, more sure than I have ever been feeling that I get. I just know, and I cannot explain how. I know for 100% certainty when people are lying to me, and when I get a gut feeling I never listen to it, and kick myself because I'm always right. For more examples, now that my roommate has a fuck buddy, we've had many discussions about how she refuses to label it. She spends almost 24 hours a day in our dealer's room. She only ever comes back in the morning to get whatever she needs for the day. At this point I think I have to pause and give a little more context. I have been going through one of the toughest spots in my life lately. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I promise it's relevant. I find myself not caring about college so much, and about really anything in general, even my own life. I found myself talking about how easy it would be and how much better and, as dark and fucked up as it is, how people will actually pay attention once I'm dead. Now I say this solely because I think it correlates to what's been happening. I believe that with extremes in life, it becomes more, we'll say, powerful. So back to the story. More recently I find myself waking up at max a minute before she'll walk in the door in the morning. Before she would wake me up and have to deal with my passive-aggressive wrath, but now, my mind will wake me up just before she walks in the door. At other times I'll think of someone or something random, and somehow that thing or person will pop up in some way. One day a few months ago, something reminded me of my ex, whom I hadn't spoken to in many months. The next day, she contacted me at 6:30 a.m. Other small things like thinking of a song, or something little and then the song comes on, or the book or TV show gets mentioned. But it's never super popular things, it's things I have a personal interest in, and then I'll see them mentioned somewhere that's somewhat obscure or random. I can tell I'm not explaining this in a way that does it justice. I'm a huge fan of the weather, and the phenomena surrounding the various weather occurrences. I check my weather app multiple times a day because I just like to know things. Some days I'll wake up and without checking the weather, one of my first thoughts will be, I really hope it rains, or I feel like there will be a storm today. And lo and behold, 97% of the time it will rain that day. Just the other day I was walking back from the campus center, and the sky looked extra gloomy and cloudy, so I checked my radar and rain chance like I normally do. As far as my app had informed me, there was essentially a 1% chance of rain for hours. I was a little bummed, but obviously nothing serious, but I felt it. When I looked at the sky, I just knew it would rain. Fast forward a minute, and I get a notification from my app that rain will begin soon. When I get to the entrance of my dorm, it starts to pour. 5 minutes earlier, there was no chance. I'm a person that really needs people to believe me. When I'm telling the truth and I'm passionate, I need people to at least understand. So if you believe me at this point, feel free to stop reading. But I have more coming. The next particular set of experiences is the most prominent in my mind. This helps me accept the whole power of the universe thing. As could be implied and deducted from my previous statement, my mother and I are currently estranged and have never had a great relationship. I can recall multiple fights over shows or movies we'd watch that I was positive we'd already watched. The TV guide would say new with a brand new air date, but I could perfectly recall things that happened in that episode or movie. I know for a fact that when my family moved into a new house 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't have cable and we went to Redbox. We rented The Lovely Bones and watched it in our empty living room with just our TV and PlayStation. I remember crying. My mother and the rest of the family insist it never happened. We'd argue over a new episode of a show we watched and whether or not we'd already watched it. Other times I'd be mad because they watched it or deleted it from the DVR without letting me watch it. But they claimed I watched it with them. Deja vu happens to me regularly. It's not something I always notice anymore because it happens to me easily a few times a week. This I relate to my passionate belief in alternate universes and dimensions. It's always very intense and very specific. Even some dreams I have are premonitions of things that happen in the near future. Earlier today I was having lunch with a new friend and I told him, I hope it rains today, while looking at our glass walls in the dining hall. The sun was shining and there were some clouds. As I was writing this, it started to pour. 5. So starting in my childhood, I began noticing that a few things in the house had duplicated. It didn't happen often. Time between instances differed between a few months and several years, so it was very sporadic. Up until recently, I just brushed it off as my inattentive personality, not noticing that my mom had purchased a second version of whatever it was that was blowing my mind. Until last weekend. It all started with a Shrek-themed jigsaw puzzle I had when I was 5 or 6. After owning it for a few years and only putting it together once, I was digging through the cabinet where we kept random stuff for us kids, crafting materials, VHS tapes, PS1 games, and board games and such. I believe it was actually a pie safe that my great-grandfather had built that we've kept in the family. Anyways, while digging through the cabinet looking for who knows what, I pulled out the Shrek puzzle and set it aside, and did a double take when I realized I had already taken the Shrek puzzle out, and I had just set a second Shrek puzzle next to it. Exact same puzzle, same size, same amount of pieces, same box art, etc. Despite my bewilderment, I just told myself my mom probably bought another one for some reason. Maybe for my younger brother. Who knows? Not too long after that, I was going through the cabinet again looking for the Toy Story VHS we had. And while I was digging, I noticed we had 2 copies of Tarzan. I don't remember there ever being 2 of them. And why would my mom buy a movie on VHS twice? The original worked just fine. At this point, I'm thinking we've got some Indian in the cupboard shit going on with this pie safe. Except instead of things coming to life, they duplicate. So naturally, I hid a bunch of money and things I wanted duplications of in there, only to come back a few weeks later and see nothing had duplicated. Oh well. Fast forward about a year. So at this point, I'm about 9 or 10. I had this red Ferrari Enzo Hot Wheel. I absolutely loved that thing. And never really knew how I got it. It was just a part of my collection of Hot Wheels that I'd had for as long as I can remember. I knew every car I had and always called them by their respective names. The Mustang, the Viper, the Firebird, etc. And there was only one, the Ferrari. I remember that distinctly. I played with that specific car any time I whipped out the Hot Wheels. One day, me and my brother decided we wanted to race a bunch of them on the hardwood floor in the kitchen. So we pulled out the bin I kept them in and dumped it onto the floor so we could go through them and pick out our favorites. Of course, I pulled out the Ferrari and some of my other favorites along with some that I knew were fast because they had the strangest and fastest spinning wheels. My brother picked out some other flashy ones that I had left in there because I knew their wheels didn't work very well. But he had also pulled out a red Ferrari Enzo and said, "I bet this one will win." And I took it out of his hand and grabbed the one I already pulled out and held them up next to each other in amazement. My beloved Ferrari had cloned itself. What's crazy is it had the same wear and tear slightly rubbed off Ferrari logo, chipped paint on the front bumper where it had crashed into several walls and other cars. And both had a wobbly right front wheel. So I knew it hadn't just been purchased and thrown into my collection. That's when I knew something strange was happening, and at the time I blamed the ghost we thought we had in our house. Over the years it happened with other random things around the house, like the pogo stick we had in our garage, an action figure I used to play with often, and several other small toys buried in the toy box. The Maroon 5 CD we had in the car, and the apple peeler we had stowed away in a cabinet in the kitchen. This one had even my mom questioning reality. It seemed to only happen to things that were stowed away for long periods of time, until last weekend. I was sitting around the house in my comfy athletic sports shorts that I wear at least once a week, when my girlfriend walks out of the bedroom wearing the same shorts. She had worn mine before, and always loved them because of how soft they were. So I said, "Oh, you bought a pair for yourself?" And she said, "No, these are yours." And right after she said that, she got a confused look on her face. I looked down to look at the shorts I thought I was wearing. And then back at her, who's now realizing what's happened, and I'm like, "Babe, I think my shorts have cloned themselves because this is the only pair of these I've ever owned." And she laughed because she thought I was joking, and I gave her this super serious look and said, "I'm not kidding you. This has happened to me before, like several times before. It's been years since I've experienced anything like this. But this incident brought on a flood of memories of all the incidents mentioned above. These incidents just be coincidence, things I've always owned 2 of that I just never paid enough attention to. Possibly. But my mom swears she's only ever owned 1 apple peeler. And the Ferrari having the same wobbly wheel and paintwear just blows me away. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, Episode 83, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I was starting to think we might have another week with no glitch video there, but it came together in the end, thankfully, thanks to some kind people sneaking in at the last minute with the permission to use their stories. Also, one of the biggest glitch videos I've done for a while. I'm usually struggling to make them long enough, which was nice to see. I'm a little bit late getting these done tonight because the first couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, my days were completely disrupted by people coming to do things in my home. They're done now, thankfully. But it means my sleeping schedule, which I had been messed up and I got all fixed, is now completely messed up again. I did not wake up till quite late. Well, I'll sort it again, I'm sure. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.